I'd like to talk about the subject of memories. And before I forget, I would like to sincerely encourage everybody of any age to write a diary with a pen in a book of paper. The earlier the better. I did write somewhat of a couple of pages of a diary when I was younger, and my mother encouraged me to, but I didn't really see the point because at that age, maybe I was, 11, 12, 13, that kind of age, maybe even a little bit younger, I kind of thought, well, it's not as if I'm going to forget any of the things that I did. But not only do you forget the things that you did, but the things that you remember, you suddenly look back on them and you're not really so sure whether those things happened in exactly the way you remember them. And then some more time passes, and then you're no longer sure at all whether the things that you did are really things that you did, or whether they're things that you thought you did, dreamt that you did, or saw somebody else do, especially on TV, and maybe incorporated it as one of your own memories. I think maybe a lot of you are realizing now that this is one of the big tricks that they have done to us. The other thing is, of course, I'll mention a phenomenon to you. It's a literary motif, but I remember it from Macbeth when some characters in it get very worried that a particular character, who was said to have been born not of woman. Now, what this meant was that he was born of a woman, but that he was born of a caesarean section. I suppose the idea is, and I don't remember whether it's Augustus Caesar or Julius Caesar, but was born of a caesarean section, and that's where the name came from. I'll look it up and put it up on the screen. Anyway, because you might think, okay, why would it matter? Well, the manner of your birth, whether it affects you or not, we know if you don't have enough oxygen at birth, that's going to affect you. But there is a theory that the traumatic nature of your birth might affect you. And no matter how easy it goes, there's always a trauma in just, even if it was perfectly smooth transition, let's say, to put it gently, there's always a trauma, I think. I don't think I'm unique in this, in simply changing your surroundings at all. Even if your new surroundings are vast and wonderful, much less enclosed, let's say, it's not nice to leave a place that you're familiar with, or maybe a place which is the only place you've ever known, and you felt safe and secure, and then you have to go out into the world. That can be traumatic. And with trauma, there can be several effects. One of them can be that you lose your memory. So there is a theory that people who are born, let's say, that includes all of us, probably. There might not be many people listening now who haven't been born. Okay, come on, back now onto topic here. I'm chiding myself. There is a theory that because of this trauma, you forget memories that you may have had while in utero, in other words, while you were in the womb. And it stands to reason that, when mothers say that they think happy thoughts and even, talk to the baby or sing to the baby, that the baby hears the mother's voice and is very much soothed by this, and that anybody else talking in the vicinity, they hear as well. And so if there's any shouting or arguing, this may affect the baby's temperament. It stands to reason we're not out of the realm of fairly hard science yet at this point. But there is a theory that if you are not born naturally, so by naturally I mean, by going down the birth canal, that you are deprived of a journey which may be beneficial in some way, but may also be detrimental in that it robs you of your memories, either in utero, or they go one further and they say that in this kind of Macbeth type lore, the baby may have memories of a world prior to having been conceived. And that would be a game changer, wouldn't it? with all their hocus pocus and worldly spells, they wouldn't be able to compete with somebody who might have knowledge that they had brought with them from the netherworld or from another world into this mortal realm. So my first question to anybody out there is, have they heard of this? I'm going to guess yes. And what do they think about it? Just superstitious nonsense? Or could there be something to it? Or at the very least, is it interesting to ponder the philosophical implications of such a thing, were it to be possible? And then coming back into the realm of what are genuine memories? I remind you again that floppy disks, magnetic material that are physical, in that sense, they can be touched and destroyed very easily. CDs that I burned and even CDs that I bought haven't lasted now into the second decade of the 21st century. Neither have all hard disk drives, you know, the ones with spinning metal magnetic plates. They might last a decade or two even. But there's no guarantee at all that they're going to last any more than 10 years. So you constantly have to keep copying data from one thing to the next and moving it from one thing to another medium. Now, the other thing then to consider is that in 20 years' time, there's no guarantee that the formats that you use will be the formats that are used in the future. And there's no guarantee that there will be backwards compatibility for those formats. So if you write your diary or your book or your thoughts, whatever they may be, the photographs now that we have, yes, they use fairly standardized formats, but these weren't always the case, and those things might change as well, and you just never know. What I can tell you is that photographs of me when I was a baby, there weren't that many, but the ones that are, they did last, and they are like indelible memories now. When I look at them, I not only remember, well, I don't actually remember myself as much, but I remember the photographs, looking back at them and being, as most people were, so embarrassed about these photograph albums when they'd be shown to friends or girlfriends or strangers. You know, what has survived are photographs in albums. If they're put away, they have a plastic type of film over them, and then they're in a heavy binder. So if you print out any of your photographs, I encourage you to do that and use good paper and printing processes. Yes, they may fade, but that adds to the memory in a way, you know, and in a way that filters on, you know, some kind of photographic sharing site like Instagram just can't do. It's artificial. That's the real thing. Fading in the sunlight is the real thing, or fading through age is the real thing. It gives it an authentic quality, and it allows you a way to put a date on it as well. Don't crop out things like cars in the background. You can date a photograph based on the model year of a car. But then things that I wrote in a diary, or even on the back of an envelope, or in a copybook, if they got put into a plastic bag and then they're in the loft or the attic, you pull those out of the attic when you're cleaning one day, and it could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, and it'll still be there, written on a piece of paper, the thing that you wrote. You don't need anything to push it into to read it. You can read it straight away. Now, even more than that, if you want something to last the centuries, carve it in stone and bury it in the earth. And that's why, you know, we have this way of thinking. Well, I do, I'll admit to myself anyway, without sort of trying to speak for us all. We have this way of thinking that, oh, these ancient people, if they just wrote etchings on a stone, they were very primitive, not like us with our sophisticated technologies. But like Ozymandias, that's King Ramesses II, I believe, of Egypt, ancient Egypt, he was a pharaoh. He thought that all of his works would last for tens of thousands of years. And maybe I'll put a link to the Ozymandias poem. And eventually, the sands of time will wipe away everything, erase everything like an Etch-a-Sketch. So think about how long you want your message to last. Your lifetime, the lifetime of your children, their children maybe. Do you want to pass on something? Well, if you're going to write it in stone, you're obviously going to spend a lot of time with a hammer and chisel. So you're not going to be very verbose. You're going to think about, what can I write here in as densely packed a way as possible? And that's why things like the Rosetta Stone. You're going to write something where you're going to say, right, if somebody finds this, maybe the message isn't as important as the fact that we've written something in several different languages, and it will allow them to decode what we mean. And then from that, they'll know the format, and then they can go looking at other things. But just don't make the mistake of thinking, like I did for so long, that these people were primitive. You see, we are the short-sighted people, and that's a primitive way of thinking. We think that whatever we happen to do right now will be around forever. Whereas we know that 20 years ago, even 10, you couldn't do most of the things we do now. Watch live video, stream video to hundreds of thousands of people at the same time. Watch things not just in high definition, but in 4K, and that won't sound impressive in a few years' time. 8K will be standard and so on, perhaps. Or something, a next step in things where it really will be visors and virtual immersive 3D and all that kind of thing. We think it's progress, but then we'll yearn for old school, analog, real as far as we knew, touching and feeling and smelling, tasting, running, smelling the earth after it's had a hard rain and then the sun comes out and the evaporation brings the smell of the dust and the water through our noses. So we'll yearn for the days where everything didn't have to be virtual. Now, I'll leave it for another day. I'll say I did have a memory. Now, maybe I'll put this in now. My earliest memory, as far as I remember, but I can't be sure anymore, is I was in a cot in my crib, my manger, whatever is the right word for it, not a manger. And I was about to, I think I'd woken up and I was in my room. I was all alone, staring up at the ceiling. Maybe I could see my legs and arms, and I kind of went, maybe I'll make a noise now. And, where am I? I don't feel happy. I feel like, I think I can hear noise in the distance. What's going on? So I think, whatever words or whatever thought processes were going on in my head that were independent of language, or of the English language at least, I had considered at that moment to call out, to scream, to cry for my mother. Indignantly, like, where are you? Why aren't you standing watch over me, adoring me as I sleep, And at that moment then I saw a sunbeam come through the pattern of the weave in the curtains, and it made a sort of a sparkling type of an effect on the material as it shone through it. And I thought to myself, okay, I really appreciate that sunbeam. I love how it is lighting up the dust particles as they, I suppose, sail through the air in this liquid. It's not a liquid, it's an air, but it's behaving as though it's like water. And I said to myself, do you know what? I won't scream just now. I'm going to look at this for another few minutes, or seconds even. And then, after I'm finished looking at it, I can scream if I want. But I'll see how I feel after that. So, thinking back, if that really was me, and it must have been, before the age of 1.5 or even 1, maybe I was a few months old in my crib. Because I didn't have any language, and I don't think that I could stand or get up on my own. So I must have been quite a young infant. And then I think that can't really be a genuine memory, can it? But I don't know. And I suppose my other question to you is, what's your earliest memory? And how can you be sure of it?